I hope we will touch on how this group has found employers and how you too could think about your networks and your ability to find employers in your communities. And then working either with sectors or individual employers. So there's sort of a skill to both. And then I hope we're going to give you some good advice. We'll leave you with some good advice and some good tips on how to reach employers in your communities and how to satisfy the needs of employers and make them repeat customers and well integrated into your programs. So don't forget, you can add questions in chat. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. I'd like to start with Vanessa Bennett. Vanessa Bennett's with Jobs for the Future, and she really, I don't know about your exact title. We always think of you as the rural wrangler at Jobs for the Future. I'll let you tell a little bit more about all the things you do, but I know you're engaged in this apprenticeship and work-based learning division of that organization, and we appreciate your face and keeping rural at the table. It can be hard with an organization that serves a national audience. Then we have Amy Haddon. Amy Haddon is from Deep East, Texas, and she is the director of the Deep East Texas College and Career Technical Alliance. Career Technical College Career. I'll let her introduce that. I think I got all the words in. I just don't know if I have them in the right order. So Amy, I'll give you a chance to straighten me out on that.
Deep East Texas
I have Rachel
College
Moore.
and Career Academy. Yeah.
College and Career Academy.
Yeah.
College and Career Academy. Okay, got it. I also have Rachel Moore. Rachel Moore is the workforce director with Santa Fe Youth Works in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I have Becky Rowe, and Becky Rowe is with Shasta College in California, Northern California, and really does their forest health work. And that is part of a specific division in the college, which thinks about forestry, ag, industrial technology, some of those career pathways. And so we'll hear from her a little later. So I will give each of you will have a chance to go a little bit deeper into what you do, because I think that helps people center questions or identify who they think might best answer their question. So let's kick this party off. Vanessa, I'm going to let you start. Talk a little bit about JFF and then what you do there, and then talk about this initiative.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And I want to start by saying I'm going to change my business cards to say Rural Wrangler. That is a fantastic title. Thank you for that. And thank you to you and the Rural Youth Catalyst Project and Rural Assembly for bringing us all together today to talk about employer engagement in rural communities. I'm just going to offer a little bit of context for today's conversation. So this sort of comes in part as the result of the partnership that JFF has with the Rural Youth Catalyst Project through our Apprenticeship Expansion and Modernization Fund initiative, which we affectionately call AEMF. And AEMF is a 4-year project that JFF has with the Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship. And the work is really focused on increasing equity and access to registered apprenticeship for opportunity youth. And just to do a little bit of level setting around that population for anyone who may not be familiar with the term, opportunity youth are young adults 16 to 24 who are disconnected from work and education. And these young people, they face really significant barriers to the labor market, many of which have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And, we really feel that registered apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, work-based learning can all provide additional on-ramps into the work and education systems for these young people if they are designed in ways that meet their needs, center them in the program, and really focus on creating supportive and, nurturing environments where they can thrive. So all of that is to say that this project has really been the success that it's been because of the phenomenal work of the 15 sites that we work with. And those 15 sites are across the country. They're comprised of workforce boards, CBOs, and school collaboratives. I want to give a quick shout out to Amy, who is on the panel today from the Deep East Texas College and Career Academy. She's one of the sites in this project. And really what we've tried to do over the last few years with these communities is understand how we need to design training and pathways to registered apprenticeship that center young people and that really connect them not just to sort of those first jobs or entry kind of level employment through apprenticeship, but to opportunities for long-term career advancement. And a lot of what we've done is focused on scaling pathways, building new registered apprenticeship programs, and really identifying those promising practices for training and program design. Now, with all of that said, I do want to highlight that really Amy and her team, they're the only kind of predominantly 100% rural community in our network of sites. We have some other sites who are serving rural communities as part of their service area. But what we've really learned through this project and the work that we've done with Amy and Kathy with you in the Rural Youth Catalyst Project is what it means to build apprenticeship and work-based learning ecosystems in rural communities and what strategies and practices and quite frankly, policy and systems changes are needed to make sure that participation in apprenticeship and access to apprenticeship in a rural place is achievable, right? And we've really built our understanding around how this work looks different in rural places and how it looks different from one rural community to another. So there is a forthcoming paper about employer engagement, which is sort of the foundation for our conversation today that I want to flag. But it's been a really fantastic partnership and project. And I've really appreciated the opportunity to really build a deeper understanding about what this work can look like and should look like in these places. I'm also realizing I sort of jumped into the project before giving a little bit about myself. So my work is really focused on apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship and work-based learning at JFF. And I come from a background spending many years working with the opportunity youth population, both in direct service and indirect service. And, to your point about being a rural wrangler, have really tried to bring a lot of what I have learned through my career, including time spent at Youth Build USA, around rural communities and rural youth development into the work I do at JFF. So that, I think you raised a really great point, Kathy, around how do you keep these communities in mind when you have a national focus, so that we're always thinking about, okay, this is the funding we have, this is the program design we're going to use, but what does that mean for a rural community? And what does that mean community by community? Because I think the same can be said of our urban colleagues. Not every city is the same, but really trying to, make sure that rural shows up. And it shows up in ways that are authentic to those communities and allow those communities to drive the decision-making and drive the design, right? It's not for us to go in and say, do this. Those communities know what they need. It's for us to provide the support and resources we have to support their vision.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. I almost feel like I should let Amy follow you. I don't know if Amy follows you, but I'm going to let Amy talk next. Amy, tell us a little bit about the Alliance. I think it's an interesting model, and I think people will want to hear about that. And then the idea that you are part of this initiative that Vanessa mentioned about apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship, and give us a little idea of what you're working on.
Hey, thanks. Can y'all hear me? Because I had to put headphones on because of noise outside. You can hear me? Okay, good. So DECA is our acronym. It stands for Deep East Texas College and Career Alliance. And then our campus is what we call the Academy. It fits within the acronym that we already made, so that's what we went with. But we are a partnership between 6 rural East Texas school districts. Our mission is that, together we can offer our students more than we each could individually. Many of the districts that we work with are not only rural, but they're also remote. And those are actually specific designations in the state of Texas that allows students access to certain types of opportunities. The enrollment in some of our districts is so incredibly low that they maybe only are graduating about 16 kids each year from their senior class. Our largest school district is only graduating about 120. So our schools battle with the issue of funding. They also battle with an issue of keeping their doors open every year because of lack of funding. And students don't have equal access to the same sort of programs that students in metropolitan parts of Texas would. And when I say that, I mean Houston, Dallas, Austin. But not only that, even smaller districts that maybe are only having 10,000 kids when together all 6 of us only have about 1,800 kids. So the design of the Alliance was an opportunity for us to say, hey, I have welding on my campus. Your students can come take welding classes at our campus, and our students can go over to your campus and take allied health courses. So none of the districts were responsible for completely equipping, funding, or staffing any of those programs. It sort of works out like a co-op. What I have on my campus, your students are welcome to attend, and vice versa. And so high school students have the opportunity to sort of navigate between the programs that are offered between multiple different school districts, allowing them more opportunities. But we also serve opportunity youth, which is a completely different type of student. And so because we allow high school students access to our campus at the day in the mornings, our opportunity youth students come in the afternoon, because we don't right now mix populations, but I think that we will have the ability to do that in the future. We have a different type of programming for them. So we want to allow them to have access to the same sort of educational opportunities or career training. We're just doing that in the afternoon. We found that working with apprentice programs was difficult for us because of the lack of large employers. And so many of the opportunities in our area are locally owned. And there was a fear that we saw of them committing to educating or training or employing someone that was labeled apprentice, because they didn't have any previous experience with that, and neither did anyone else in the area. So for us, our biggest barrier was educating our employers in the community, our workforce providers, our training classes, but also our students too, on what the opportunities would afford for them in the future. So let's see, it really was about relationship building, and we've been doing that. But in a small town, I kind of think we have an advantage, because like Kathy and Vanessa both said, we know everyone in our community. And so that did give us a little bit of an advantage. So we started reaching out to the people that we know, and started sharing, what a positive interaction apprenticeship could provide for their workplace.
Amy, how are you actually communicating with employers? Is that one employer at a time, or have you found some ways to bring them together to talk to more than one at once?
We did both. So we had a lunch and learn, and for healthcare opportunities, our employers in our area, we really just we looked at job boards like on Facebook, and to see what positions were they hiring for. And then we got the list of members from our Chamber of Commerce, and we just started emailing everyone and calling them and saying, hey, would you be interested in coming to have lunch with us, on this specific date? We'll provide food. We just want to be able to share some information about what we're doing here in the community, and maybe how it can help you solve some of your staffing needs. And so we invited people to the center. We also invited local employers to come out and talk to our instructors and say, these are the things that I need an entry-level staff person to come ready with. These are the skills they need to be successful as an entry-level employee, to be a competitive candidate, right, for an employment opportunity that I have open. And they were able to speak directly with the instructors that were teaching those classes and say, when they graduate from your program and apply as an employee with me, I need them to know how to do X, Y, and Z. And so we had that opportunity, and we went back to the drawing board and amended our curriculum so that we could make sure we were hitting all those things that our local employers said. And then we reached out to the people that we knew, maybe on a one-on-one basis, and said, hey, we know you're hiring. Is there any way you would consider changing those two positions to an apprentice opportunity? And some of them said yes, and some of them said no, but that's not failure to us. That just meant that with that one that said no, that we had to provide additional information to them. And we continued to keep that conversation open and said, let's don't say no forever. Let's just say no for right now. And let me come back and tell me what you're afraid of. Hey, and we'll go find out all those answers for you and then come back and help you with that. And so that's really, we kind of did all three different things.
Excellent. Excellent. Hey, I want to bring Becky into this conversation because Becky, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Shasta College, but I also want you to touch on the California Forestry Management Task Force and you sort of at the as the coordinator of that workforce table and trying to draw employers into that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so first about Shasta College, and thank you all for having me here today. Again, my name is Becky Rowe. I'm with Shasta College, Director of Forest Health here. I oversee a program that has received very generous grant funding from CAL FIRE here in California. We're located in Redding, which is in the very northern part of the state, right on the I-5 corridor. We're about halfway between Sacramento and the Oregon border, right at the end of the valley. So we have lots of beautiful resources all around us. So with our heavy equipment logging operations program, what that workforce training is training skilled mechanized logging operators. So for where we live, for our region, and as a community college, serving the needs, the workforce needs, the training needs of our specific region and the communities that we serve. That's a huge economic driver for us, the logging industry and the timber industry. And so it really is made up of small business, owner operator, contractors, kind of a contractor base who does a lot of work for mostly private timberland owners, and as well as some federal lands, some fuels management contracts with the state, those sorts of things, but really driven by private landowners, Sierra Pacific Industries being the largest and really incredibly involved with our program. So I want to get back to Kathy's question about the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force. So that is a statewide task force, and then there are working groups within that task force focused on other individual areas of the forest sector, and workforce touches all of those. And we do have a workforce development subgroup, which I co-chair with a colleague from CAL FIRE. And within that, our challenge really is having private industry show up. And I think that, so the forest sector and a lot of those forest jobs naturally are falling into very rural areas. I think that it naturally tends to be, there's a lot of tradition. It's a very generational industry. There's a lot of tradition that is handed down. I definitely would say that there's some reticence to change. The dynamic between education and between a very traditionalist industry such as that can sometimes, right on at face value, be something that there's a lot of trust building that has to happen first. I actually used to work for Sierra Pacific Industries, so I have some industry background that has, you know, I understand the perspective, and I understand my own frustration being on the industry side, trying to work with education, where some of those barriers are, and that industry does not want someone to come in and take control. So to Vanessa's point, where you were talking about, you can't go in there and be like, this is what you need. You have to really, really listen. You have to respect the traditions that are there. You have to respect the perspective, and you have to respect the expertise that's been handed down from generation to generation of stewarding these lands. And then finding out what those needs really are, and then figuring out how you can be a partner to help facilitate and implement and organize some solutions to meet those needs. So I think that's first off how you have to approach it. Getting industry to the table on a statewide. So again, thinking about, this is an industry that is very traditional in its thinking. So you've got education and you've got state government. And you're like, no, come talk with us. That's not always the most inviting place that they really want to invest much time. So some of the bigger players also understand that they need to invest some time because the conversations are going to happen whether they're there or not. And I think that that's how you can approach it when you're trying to bring them in. That's often what I remind them is whether you are at the table or not at the table, the conversation is going to happen and actions are going to be taken. So if you're not at the table and you don't have the opportunity to try to steer the conversation in a direction that you want that conversation to go, or at least to have some opportunity to navigate what that next step is going to look like, you have to be there. And if you're not there, there's a void, someone's going to fill it. And you're probably not going to be necessarily in favor of who that is or what comes out of that. And so I use that one a lot to try to bring them to the table. It's not always successful. The other is that it's just often a capacity issue. And like my contractors, my employers that I work with our logging program, those contractors are spread so thin. Most of them don't have kind of a workforce person. A lot of them are just outsourcing their HR and payroll. They're not doing it in-house. They have no idea. They pay somebody to take care of it. They collect time cards. They send it all in and they know that they need people. They know that they're struggling with filling a workforce, but it is not something of the many hats that they wear. It becomes a lower priority. So to ask them to invest that time at a table that they are not comfortable at, they would much rather, they're more likely to invest the time if you can bring the conversation to them where they are, but to try to get them to the conversation, those are challenges. So I think it's thinking about how you can bring the conversation to where they are, offer a lot of respect and a lot of transparency about everyone's goals, and respecting the perspective that they bring that's going to be different oftentimes from the other leaders at the table, but also reminding them that their voice is really important because we know how this works, right? There's a lot of funding out there. In my sector especially, there is a lot of money flowing. People, organizations, institutions are going to take advantage of that. There are going to be things developed. And so it really is in their best interest. And I think it's helpful to have those conversations and be able to be candid about it. It's in your best interest to be at the table. And so that can be seen across different sectors. This is my world, but it's applicable across all sectors.
I think that's an interesting thought about very traditional industries. I think rural has a lot of very traditional industries, right? And they don't always believe that government or education is there to help them. No. So I definitely see a challenge there in engaging. And I appreciate what you said about getting them to the table so that there's no harm done when conversations are going. It's like, first I go, oh my gosh, shouldn't we be talking about how we can benefit them? It's interesting how we talk like this sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. We're just not on the same level coming from either education or government programs, and then from the traditional industry itself.
Yeah, so, and I really do think it is just reminding them that things are going to march forward in a direction. And so if they want an opportunity to at least help steer that direction, that is their opportunity to. And that happens within this sector. We do utilize industry associations. So I have very, very close and tight partnerships with the industry associations within California, as well as just within the Western region. And so through those industry associations, it's easier to find a champion, or it's easier sometimes at the association level to be able to find somebody that the industry has selected that they trust to look out for their wants and needs. So that's another key thing as well, is that depending on what sector and depending on what sort of employer base that you're working with. If there are industry associations that you can leverage, that can often be a solution as well.
Great, thanks. Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and turn to Rachel. Rachel, I think one of the things that's interesting in sort of juxtaposing with Becky is that you guys have employers and have relationships with government. Two things. One, with government as an employer or someone you're working with. And I think about your river maintenance and restoration program. And the other thing that I'd like to have you just talk a little bit about is taking on the role of employer as sort of a way to transition opportunity youth and your relationship with the people you're getting contracts from, because it's like, instead of being employed with that employer, you're getting money and then you're doing the employing. So if you would talk about those things, I think that's very interesting.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Moore. I am the Workforce Development Director here with Santa Fe YouthWorks. YouthWorks is a leading organization in New Mexico working on youth re-engagement, and YouthWorks has been in operation since 2001. And very happy to be a part of the conversation today. So YouthWorks has, as Kathleen mentioned, a very diverse approach to youth re-engagement and providing youth job training, education, and career development opportunities. So to kind of give everyone a picture, right now, YouthWorks, this week we'll have crews going out with Youth Conservation Corps that is working in partnership with the core network at the national level, and then with the city of Santa Fe. In the last year, we've worked on 100 miles of trails with the Youth Conservation Corps, doing environmental restoration work and beautification projects on those trails, improving public access to trails, and as well as river restoration, river cleanup projects in Santa Fe. So that project was really enabled through a strong partnership with the city of Santa Fe. We also have a very robust culinary arts and catering program that serves as a really excellent job training program for our youth, but it has also become a trusted entity in its own in the community. And our culinary arts program is also unique in that we have really focused on, well, I would say at YouthWorks, we know that food is convivial, and anytime we have youth training, we are providing meals for our youth. And we also look to identify through our culinary arts program opportunities to align ourselves with contracts that are working in service to the community. So right now, the culinary arts program has shifted from doing, taking on any catering events, for that being its focus, to, for this month, providing, I think it's almost 60,000 meals for fire evacuees and emergency responders who are working on the wildfires in northern New Mexico. And youth are really leading the project. And so when we're able to shift our operations and have our culinary program be part of this emergency response when something comes up in the community, of course, like the pandemic or responding to the wildfires, youth who are in these job training programs are able to transition to take on leadership roles in service to their communities. We also operate a very interesting program called the Workforce Innovation Program, which is in partnership with the City of Santa Fe Office of Economic Development. And it is a paid apprenticeship program that offers wage subsidies that provide support for local businesses to take on youth apprentices. And the apprenticeships are 4 months long. So the apprenticeships are subsidized through the grant from the City of Santa Fe Office of Economic Development, and YouthWorks provides for a portion of the wage as well as all of the payroll expenses, taxes, workers' comp that goes in hand with bringing on a new employee. So it really relieves some of the financial burden of taking on any new employee, and then we provide the employment partners with support in navigating any of the challenges that could come up with employing a youth or young adult employee. And in all of that work, YouthWorks also provides wraparound support services for our youth, in addition to helping youth as soon as they come in, kind of, we want to immediately do, of course, do an intake. And in that intake, we assist youth in, looking at their aptitudes, interests, their values, and matching that with any of our operating employment programs, whether it's, immediately being able to plug these youth who have walked in our door to get them started right away on a work crew that's going out to work on environmental restoration, to get them started, that day even to work in the kitchen or work in emergency meals, or to step into an apprenticeship. And so having kind of this very trusting, supportive space where we're helping to triage when the youth come through our doors, and to look and of course provide assistance to any kind of pressing issues and helping them troubleshoot anything that they have going on, and then immediately stepping into work with one of our multiple youth employment programs. And I'm seeing a message. So, well, can I speak to the success of youth who are continuing to work with the employers after their apprenticeship? So I can give an example from today. I just set up a new apprenticeship with a local graphic design company, and they were really excited to take on this new youth apprentice. They still have a graduated workforce innovation program alumni who has been on their staff for 5 years. And we've seen many of those stories from local businesses who partnered with the program. And then within YouthWorks itself, I think something that's really unique and lends to the success of our program is that we have staff members who have graduated up through various YouthWorks programs who are now, directors in their own department within YouthWorks. So we have youth who, have been able to develop their careers even within YouthWorks, which, creates this environment of trust and respect, which is really important working with the population that we work with and working to create supportive relationships that ensure, the youth success within the programs themselves.
Thanks, Rachel. That does lead me to think about and maybe have people chime in about the importance of support services, and not just from the youth side, but if we just talked a minute about those critical services that make it work for the employer. What needs to be in place in order for the employer to have a successful relationship? And maybe, Rachel, you could give us a quick one, and then if somebody else wants to chime in, just take yourself off mute and I will watch that for my panelists here.
Sure, no problem. So, I mean, one thing that we, really emphasize is ensuring that our youth are stepping into opportunities that resonate with them, that are really valuing their own inherent skills and interest, and that the youth also have opportunities to have, public facing positions that enable them to work on their customer service skills and their comfort level and working with customers, working with the public. And that I think has been really essential. So, you know, ensuring that our youth feel valued in our programs, and also working on, you know, public speaking and communication skills on our end at YouthWorks.
Great. It is interesting that employers don't always see that idea that youth need to feel valued in the workplace in order to get them to sort of show up the next day, right? It's an interesting thing that we don't always talk to employers about. I'm going to let Becky jump in here.
Yeah, so I'm going to just hit on two things. And the first is from the student side. So our programs here at Shasta College, our heavy equipment program, heavy equipment logging operations program, we do a lot of work. We have a restorative justice model program that is associated with the campus. And so we've worked closely with them. There's a lot of support services there. Our program, and this leads into the next thing that's really important to our employers, because we do try to replicate for our students during their training time what that ultimate real world job is going to look like. What are going to be the expectations of the employer? What's the environment going to be like? And so it works well in conjunction with probably about 25 to 30% of our students are coming out of our Step Up program, which is our restorative justice program. We are a drug tested program. It's heavy equipment, and that's also going to be a standard in industry. That actually creates a lot of support and structure for those students coming out of the restorative justice, that accountability. And so all of our faculty and our support staff are all trained on reasonable suspicion, and all students are in a random poll. And so, you know, there is that kind of that replication of what industry is going to look like as well. And so industry really appreciates that. The other thing that industry appreciates is our students are actually training on the forest. So they're training on equipment on the forest on an active unit where they actually are producing logs. And so getting that exposure to what that environment is like, that working environment like, is really valuable for our employers. They are the first ones to say that, great, sometimes we know that you get students coming in and they think they want to do this, and they are, you know, enrolled in your program, and then they decide they really don't want to do it. But they see that, the employers see that as a win, that the student is making that decision during the training period with us, rather than, you know, after they've invested 6 weeks of putting one of their best operators in a mentoring training capacity with them and losing production and having that affect their bottom line, and then still losing the employee, not being able to retain that employee, and then starting from scratch. So that, from the employer perspective, is something that's really important to them as well. And we have advisory committees, we have advisory councils, we have regular input and a feedback loop with those employers. And so we really are always wanting to kind of readjust and make sure that what we are doing in that academic setting, in the classroom setting, really is in alignment with producing skills that they need to see in their entry-level folks coming out. And then the last thing too, I think, is setting the expectation for the student. Setting the expectation for the student, they're coming out with a foundational understanding of skills that are going to put them into an entry-level position. They are not coming out as a certified expert operator that's going to join a crew and jump ahead of somebody who's been there 10 years. You know, that's not going to happen. But we have our pre-apprenticeship. Our certificate program is actually a California registered pre-apprenticeship. And then we do have an apprenticeship program as well, California registered apprenticeship for forest training, multi-employer apprenticeship. So it takes a village to kind of get to the numbers that we need to get to. And the employers, it's a non-union and non-traditional apprenticeship. The employers run the committee. The employers run that apprenticeship through committee. So getting a student plugged into that and getting them up through the process, they at least have some structured steps that they know they are going to get to see through that whole cycle. but setting that expectation for the student that you're going to come out with entry-level skills. You're not coming out as, you know, as a professional operator who's been doing this for 15 years.
One thing that, oh, go ahead, Vanessa.
Sorry, Kathy, I was just going to jump in and just sort of framing this around apprenticeship a little bit more as Becky has teed up. I think what's really valuable for employers as well is helping them understand sort of what you can offer to them in terms of building their understanding of apprenticeship, if they might be unfamiliar with it, you know, what you can do to support them in getting into apprenticeship and managing that program, you know, and that can be anything from providing a pre-apprenticeship like Shasta College does to sort of provide that you know, additional training and support that somebody might need to get ready for the registered apprenticeship program. It could be what Amy and her team at DECA do as a group apprenticeship sponsor. So they do a lot of the registration piece, the administration of the program. I think particularly if you're talking with an employer in any community, but in rural communities, who's not familiar with apprenticeship, the more that you as an organization can build your understanding to provide some of that education and training to them, I think that's a huge value as well to employers who may not have the capacity to take that on themselves.
Hey, that's what I was going to add, Vanessa. And I want to apologize to y'all. I want to turn my camera on, but I have really low connectivity. I'm afraid that that's one of the reasons why the video streaming. We kind of take a different point of view with our work. So one of the biggest concerns for our area is that the employers don't have the capacity to take on extra administrative tasks. So we offer to do that for them. And to be honest, it doesn't take up that much of our time, but that's one of the things that sort of helps set their mind at ease is that they're already short staffed. Now they're training a new employee. It's maybe a mom and pop owned organization. The idea of Department of Labor interference is kind of scary. And so we say, hey, no problem. We'll do everything for you. And it's really just very minimal amounts of paperwork and registration. And that has helped. So for us, we're just like, what do you need from us to help you feel comfortable with this situation or to make it work? Because we want to make it work too. And so we provide that administrative clerical tasks for our local employers to help them feel comfortable with that situation.
I do think employers are looking for that point person, and they'd prefer it not to be 10 different point people who have the answers to their questions. I think particularly when we think about registered apprenticeship, because it's pretty specific. Oops. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was off. So I do think that that's sort of an interesting piece of this whole picture. Having a single expert in an area in rural, so that everybody can feed into that, whether you're somebody who's working with students or an employer looking for answers to questions, to be able to have a base of knowledge somewhere. A couple of things I want to bring out. One is that the weeding out question. So how do programs who are working with youth help employers by weeding out young people who think they want to do that, but don't really want to do that once they've had some experience in it? So more work-based learning opportunities that give them that short-term sort of feel like, is it right for me or not? So the employer doesn't have to deal with that. The other thing is sort of the chicken and the egg question. I appreciated Becky, who's working in forestry, which is really big in Northern California, and on fire, which adds a whole different focus, which is why funds are flowing in California. We can either clean up afterwards, or we can try to manage the forest differently to have less fire. But she could create an apprenticeship program where there's multiple employers who may feed into that or take students out of that. But sometimes it's a matter of working that hard to create apprenticeship where you might have 2 employers. It's exactly what they're asking for, but you almost have to do that same amount of work to create the apprenticeship for 1 or 2. And so I always think about that scale question. How many times can we really scale an apprenticeship where we create a program that then turns out 10 or 20 apprentices a year, when in reality, we don't have that many employers or that many youth in any one track, right? Which makes it a little different in rural.
If I can jump in on that, Kathy, it does make it different. I think the way that we have approached this is, and I have an apprenticeship coordinator, and I was very involved in the front side and the writing of the standards of the apprenticeship, and I still sit on the committee as an advisor, but I do not manage the day-to-day of the actual apprenticeship administration. So I just want to say that up front. But the approach really has been, it's a statewide apprenticeship. Once we kind of here locally got all the nuts and bolts done, right? We've written the standards. Things have been tweaked. We have all of our related supplemental instruction done and written and ready to go. All the OJT done, written, ready to go. Things are being logged. We're enrolling apprentices. Now we're at the point where we are, because that committee is a multi-employer unilateral training committee structure, non-union, made up of employers on the committee that have voting rights, that manage the apprenticeship. It now has become in their interest to see it be successful, to continue to be successful. So they are able to talk to other employers within their industry and other areas of the state. So we have just enrolled employer partners well outside of our region, of our immediate region. And so we intend to continue to see that, because you're right, for the numbers to be there, we have to take a statewide perspective, because everywhere that we're looking is going to be very rural. Now, one other thing that has been discussed, I don't really think that we've taken any action on it, but I found it interesting. I happened to be on a call and someone was sharing, it was like an electrician apprenticeship of some sort, and it had tiers. It had 3 different tiers, like a commercial, a residential, and like an industrial track, all under this one umbrella of the same apprenticeship. And so I think that's something else in rural areas. I mean, like I said, we haven't implemented it yet, but it's something that we started just having discussions about, is that if you can have something that's really broad, which we did very intentionally write our apprenticeship and our standards to be very broad. And so the thought is perhaps there's opportunity to kind of take these different tracks that fall within the forest sector as a whole. So right now it's really focused on equipment operators. But what if we also did forest technicians, which is more on the ground? It's different, totally different work. It's a totally different student. It's a different pipeline of trainees coming in and apprentices coming in. And so breaking out some tiers within the overall arching umbrella, so then you have lots of almost cafeteria style menus, so that all of your little employers that you have spread out across the state in these rural areas, there's a little something for everyone, but keeping it all under one management structure and one administrative structure. So again, we haven't done that yet, but we're talking about it. And I think it's an interesting idea that could be a solution for the heavy lift of apprenticeship in a small rural area with very minimal employers.
Thank you, Becky. That reminds me a little bit, I know we're running out of time, but it reminds me a little bit about Rachel, where you started with a culinary curriculum, but I know now you've sort of reached out to greenhouse owners and other farmers, and you're sort of building out your placements for young people based on sort of a concentric circle model, where you start with one thing and then add to it that are related pieces.
Right, exactly, Kathleen. And we started our culinary and food service and catering program in 2008, when our goal was to feed our own youth work crews. So we started very small, and we went internally and just asked youth in our existing programs who would be interested in learning more about culinary arts, and started with just 2 to 3 youth working within the very nascent culinary program and feeding work crews. And we got a grant to be able to buy the food truck that then followed the youth crews to their different work sites, and people really took notice of that. And I think that's, an important aspect, being able to have youth out in the community, with youth works vest on when they're doing trail work, or to have, like this beautiful food truck that people associate with youth works. That's important. And, just having a public face and sharing part of the story, but it really grew from there, and having chefs and mentors from the culinary arts community in Santa Fe support our program and support youth in gaining skills in our program, and building up to years later taking on large special events for catering, school contracts, doing 1,000 meals a day for low-income populations, and being able to have the capacity to work with partners like World Central Kitchen to respond when the community is facing an emergency like the wildfires that we're navigating right now, and having youth help produce and distribute thousands of meals a day. So that's baby Belle chiming in there, but it's creating initially small but scalable programs, and really creating something that is replicable elsewhere in your organization. So we have attendant programs that have kind of followed suit, that give youth skills in other fields, that has been really successful.
I do think that it's an interesting idea, and probably more fundable when you're building off of something you already have and you're doing that next piece, right? Because you've been proven successful in one place and you have demonstrated you have connection and purpose for this next piece because it builds on something you've already done. Hey, Rachel, Consuelo wants to know if any youth have started food truck businesses.
Oh, that's a great question. Not that I'm aware of, but I can get back to the group with that answer, but not off the top of my head, no, but I'll ask and come back with that. But I did want really quickly also want to mention, we, as you're saying, have also invested in working in other aspects of the food system too. And I think that's really invaluable for our youth to, kind of have these different touch points, working in sustainable agriculture, composting, planting out the city's, first food trees with the intention of growing out food forest here in Santa Fe, and just, getting a holistic exposure to different job and career tracks within food systems and food systems planning has been really valuable to all of our participants.
Great. We're getting up against time. We're recording, so I'm going to ask you guys one more question because it'll be in the recording, even if participants are dropping off. What is one piece of advice that you would give people out there to do their best work working with employers in rural communities? I don't know who wants to start. Rachel, you're off mute right now. Do you want to be first?
Sure, thank you. Just to echo some of what has already been shared, I think working with rural communities in Santa Fe is definitely a small community. Investing in relationships, really making time to meet with people. I'm always on the phone with both business partners and our youth clients. So to have, building trust into those relationships so that they invest back into your programs, but relationship building really being key.
Great. Becky. Oh, Amy, sorry. Becky, you'll be after Amy. Amy got off mute first.
I agree with Rachel. Relationships for us are everything. And you touched on the idea earlier that we don't have the luxury of being anonymous in our communities. So we take a personal responsibility when we're working with employers and students to make sure that the work that we're doing is a good fit for everyone that's involved. We're going to see them at church. We're going to see them at the grocery store. And so we want to make sure that the relationships that we're building and the connections that we're making are positive for all that's involved. And I also think it's really important to go with your gut instinct. And I know that's not something we always do in business, but if you have a feeling that the relationship with a specific employer is not going to be a positive interaction at whatever level, that you should trust your instinct. And I don't want to put a young adult in a situation where they feel obligated to work for someone who maybe doesn't have their best interest in mind. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes that happens. And so we look for, you know, integrity and honesty for when we're picking employers that we want to work with, people that we know are already upstanding in our community. We don't want any one of our young adults to be taken advantage of, but also saying honesty on our part too. You know, if we don't have an answer to a question, I say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out and I'll get back with you on that information. And so I think that builds a level of trust where I'm not trying to be the know-all of everything, and we can learn together along the way. But for us, it's all about treating everyone exactly like we want to be treated, whether that's a young adult in the process or an employer that wants to come in to part of our program.
Thank you very much, Amy. Becky, you're next, and then Vanessa, you're batting cleanup.
I mean, I could kind of say ditto and ditto, and I'm going to say the same thing, just a little bit different. When I was thinking about this question, and I thought just like one word is, I think it's humility. I think it's demonstrating that humility and respect for the employers, understanding that they know what they need. And then on the flip side, just like Amy was just talking about, it's also really understanding your individual students and where their needs are and what those fits are going to be, and then doing the best that you can do to pair those up correctly, and not, you know, being picky. Through our apprenticeship program, we have employers, their employers interview with our apprenticeship committee, and that apprenticeship committee determines whether or not, you know, they're an employer that they want to see representing what this industry is, or are they just an employer that's just trying, you know, that's trying to do something that has a lot of what's in it for me, for the employer, but not too much of that for the student. But I really do think it's approaching things with humility and not coming in with the answers to everything, but coming in with the perspective of, explain to us where your barriers are, and then being able to take that information and coming up with some different solutions to take back to them, but not coming in and trying to lead the conversation off with these prepackaged notions that you might have, but really taking that opportunity to build the trust and listen to what their needs are.
Thanks, Becky. Vanessa.
Yeah, so I'll say +1 to everything that has been shared. I think the two things I will add are, you know, one, don't forget to take full advantage of everyone in the community that can connect you to an employer, your chambers of commerce, you know, your local government, perhaps your economic development agencies. I've got to make a plug for them, because I think through the work I've done, Amy and Kathy, with both of you, I've really come to appreciate the important role that your economic development partner can play in facilitating connections with employers that don't just center your community and job creation, but can also help to facilitate that conversation and knowledge building for a potential employer around apprenticeship. And then the other thing that I'll also lift up is, I think before you go into that conversation with an employer, define what success looks like for you and the young people you serve. And that will give you sort of a starting point to make sure that there's a mutual vision that you're building with an employer. And I think that lends itself to so much of what's been shared here around making sure that that employer is the right fit for the young person that you're serving, and that their apprenticeship or their work-based learning opportunity is really going to be the thing that creates an environment where that young person can thrive and succeed.
Thank you, Vanessa. Well, there's a lot to say, isn't there? And a lot to talk about. I'll add one thing to what Vanessa said, in that when you think about connections, think about clubs in your community that are looking for programs, and that as an opening for you to talk about apprentice, work-based learning, another place where you can get in front. I think about Rotary. Rotary is a club of employers. That's what they're all about. So those are other places where you can access. I want to thank the panelists. I think we could have gone on beyond now fairly easily. Thank you, panelists. I thought you all brought unique visions from the places where you're working and important information for our audience. Thanks for the audience for hanging in with us, and a big shout out to Rural Assembly and the tech people behind the scenes, as well as Tyler and Whitney, who are on with us now. I want to encourage everybody to subscribe to Rural Assembly newsletter and the Yonder, which is all information and news rural. So if you subscribe to Rural Assembly, you will actually get notification when these live streams are posted. The videos of the live streams are posted, or you can go back to ruralassembly.org and check. You can look at Rural Youth Catalyst Project. So let's see, watch one last thing. We're going to be releasing 2 papers in connection with the Jobs for the Future. One is about apprenticeship programs and building apprenticeship programs in rural. And the other one is about employer engagement. So you can watch for those. If you're a subscriber, you'll get notification that they're up. If not, you'll be able to find them on ruralassembly.org or by Googling Rural Youth Catalyst Project or Jobs for the Future.